Doug, and what an ominous night, what an ominous show. To my knowledge, never in the history of my experience on talk radio, which, pretty much covers 20 years, have we seen so many converging factors, events, and warnings, counter threats, counter proposals, wheeling and dealing, phones being burned up in the background, red phones, hot phones, and everything set to go pretty much explosive. And I think it's important for people to understand something. It's really tough to get across the idea that when America was great, we stood for principles and ideals that the rest of the world pretty much longed after. We were a nation that at least honored God and acknowledged God, even had our national anthems acknowledging God, and there was a general, how would I say, reverence for God. We'd come out of, obviously, World War I into World War II, through Korea, Vietnam, and now all of the events from Iraq forward to Libya to the entire destabilization of the Middle East. Now, ladies and gentlemen, 10 years ago, I did a talk radio show in San Diego. I don't remember, it was an AM talk radio show, and it had a Muslim host and a Christian co-host. Now, that's interesting. And in those days, I was talking about the Imam Mahdi and what's called the global caliphate. The only way to understand this is in the context of Albert Pike's Mazzini's letter of World War III, that basically the Jews, Christians, and Muslims would be pitted against each other. Now, in order to understand what's going on, all of the warfare is economic. I want to repeat, all warfare is economic. Somebody wants somebody else's stuff. Someone wants territory, food supply, minerals. They want what they cannot take through barter, negotiation, or even fair trade. And I don't mean fair trade like the Fair Trade Act, which was nothing more than a license to steal. But what I'm talking about is just measures. Now, tonight, we're at the point of when will the United States strike Syria with Britain? What will the Russians do? What will the Chinese do? And ladies and gentlemen, probably the most perplexing point that Doug and I and Joe will talk about tonight is we're at a potential World War III incident with Russia where we've got literally hundreds of thousands of foreign troops here that the current administration has brought into the United States, including Russian Spetsnaz, to take out the gun owners. And, Doug, what's critical, I think, at this point in time is to recognize that we are at war from within and from without, and soon it's going to be global. Now, I believe that when you and I and Pastor Langford and Joe and all the people that joined with us around the world, we were able to hold back certain events, not stop them, but hold them back for a time. And I can tell you this from the literally hundreds, if not thousands of emails you and I and Pastor Langford have received, Doug, that a lot of people have given their hearts to Jesus. But Jesus told us all these things that were going to come to pass. And as I was praying today, and God bless Romy, she called, or I called her, and we prayed for about a half an hour. And by the way, Doug, we interceded for you in a big way and just got a real witness in our spirit that the Lord is undertaking on your behalf, and I'll just leave it at there. But the thing is that the general theme was a nation ripe unto judgment. And again, probably the dumbest statement I've ever heard is when people say, well, why would God judge America? Well, ladies and gentlemen, I can give you 100 reasons, but those are evident. What we're facing right now, and I just received a phone call 5 minutes before the air from Hawk. I didn't pick it up. He left it on my message service, that a guy we both know and who has some pretty interesting access said that the military is getting ready to strike within 9 hours. Now, concurrent with that strike, our military strikes Syria. Now, Iran has issued through the back channels today, and Doug, I think you, and I'm going to just stop and let you share what you know, and we'll go back and forth, but Iran has issued strategic nuclear threats both against the United States and Israel today. I want to say that again, ladies and gentlemen. Years ago, Doug, I don't know if it was 10 years ago or 15 years ago, I posted on my website an AP article about the nuclear detonations that were taking place in Iran. And around the world, that story was scrubbed almost within an hour or two. I actually have a hard copy of it, and you can search my archives for it, I think. But the point being is that in the world of oil money, and we're talking billions and trillions over the decades, you can buy anything you want from anybody at any time, any place, and you can get access to it. Doesn't matter what weapon system, doesn't matter nuclear materials, doesn't matter red mercury, which is real, by the way. You can buy that stuff if you are so inclined. Now, obviously, the people that want to get it can get it. And in the world of international banking, everybody's deal is related to somebody's whore or mistress. I'm going to say that again. Every country's deal are always related to somebody's whore or mistress, meaning that the double crossing, the triple crossing, and the quadruple crossing are so extreme that Ambassador A will lie to Ambassador B with a straight face, and they both spent the same night with the same Russian femme fatale, and this is a literal case I'm referring to. I won't go into details, and basically everybody knows what everybody's doing, and it's called double deal the other guy out before he double deals you out. Does it make sense?
Absolutely, it makes sense. And right before the airtime, I got a call as well, and essentially what was said was, this is the most critical moment right now. We're living the most critical time, the most dangerous time in the last 100 years in terms of our country's economy, because, as you said in the beginning, Steve, the economy is at the heart of this. So it seems like our sources are lining up in terms of information. So it makes perfect sense.
Well, and not only that, but why don't you just share a little bit, Doug, because I think it's going to be important that people understand that we have different people. And for such a time as this, and I'm going to ask the people for 5 minutes to put aside your bias, that it's me telling you what I'm telling you, those of you that seem to have nothing better to do than, criticize on Facebook and stuff. So, Doug, I want you to share what your source told you, and then I'm going to share what my sources are telling me, and then I'm going to share what the Lord shared with me while I was praying today, because my wife came in about an hour before the show and said, what's wrong with you? I said, I've never had in all the years of warning and writing and praying such a sense of sadness, not fear, not even trepidation, just sadness at what's getting ready to happen, the lives that'll be lost. I watched the little Syrian kids being pawns in this game of lie and blame, and it breaks my heart. And I looked at my granddaughter today, who was 9, who was in my office cleaning up my floor by letting her shred all the envelopes. I had all I could do to keep from just breaking down. This is so late in the game, because again, ladies and gentlemen, it's like Isaiah 22. God was warning the children of Israel what's going to happen. They're all up on the roof partying, and that's where the statement came that we quote, eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die. The point is that people know it's changed. Today you saw the story that the founding fathers are now considered terrorists by the Department of Defense. Well, who in the blazes can they not name now? And let me just say this, it's anybody but them. And tonight, tonight when I was praying, the Lord said, remember what I showed you this morning. And what he showed me this morning, I was up at 4:30 because I can't sleep, and I know I should sleep, and thank you for praying for me to sleep, people. But the U.S. military is going to experience such a staggering defeat that it's going to rock the world. I don't know if it's an aircraft carrier. The Lord said they have made war on me, Steve, and now my hand of protection is taken off them. In their fury, they will make war against the people of their own country, not knowing that the very people they're training are going to be, whether it's Spetsnaz or Chinese special operations or whoever, they're going to turn on those people. It was such a vehemence, and I'm going to quote later on, Doug, in the show, some of the most famous defectors that have ever come forward. And even though they told everybody in our Congress and Senate closed-door intelligence briefings, still the slaughter that's prepared for the U.S. military at the hands of those who they are now training is unimaginable. So sadness is in the land, and it's a thing that, to be honest with you, we're going to talk about the joy of the Lord being our strength, and that only Jesus can carry us through. But ladies and gentlemen, this isn't a time to be party hardy, and waiting for the next Super Bowl, because very soon we're going to be thrown in, and only God's mercy will stop Iran and the counter dealings going on between Saudi Arabia offering Russia control of the world's oil market and control of their natural gas market. If they just pull away from Assad, the super sunburned missiles and all the higher tech weapons that are in Syria right now. I received communication from people that are monitoring the Cuban situation. Cienfuegos Bay is an old Russian submarine thing that's been an underwater submarine base that's been reactivated. The communications coming out of there are staggering. So what I'm saying to everyone is this. We have issues right now that are so pressing and so dangerous. The other day, Doug, I think it was Friday maybe or even Saturday when the Chinese announced, possibly Thursday, when the Chinese announced that they had pretty much complete control over their satellites, and the West was supposedly dumbfounded at the control that the Chinese now are exhibiting over the satellites. I've been told that they're basically in position to knock out the complete command, control, and communication U.S. military. So you guys in the Pentagon, I don't know where you're getting your intelligence, but it's got to be obvious to you. And it may be so obvious that they are basically told to stand down. But what that means, if this thing goes total nuclear in the Middle East, and it may take a week for it to get there, but the minute a strategic, and I'm talking about strategic nuclear weapon is launched, or a tactical nuclear weapon is used against Damascus, it comes apart at the seams. So what China's done is they've achieved a technical feat where they basically can maneuver their ASAT weapons, so that's anti-satellite weapons, and I've been told they have done so. And in essence, ladies and gentlemen, that's how close we are on the brink. This isn't melodrama. This isn't War of the Worlds. This is reality. Go ahead, Doug.
No, you're exactly right. And as I was told, now, Steve, really what I'm saying, these are not my words. I didn't come up with any of this through research. But ladies and gentlemen, first thing, and I want to thank you, Steve, for linking to the article, my newest article concerning Syria, which is the Intelligence Insider, Syria, World War III, and the Hidden Objective. If you go to HomelandSecurityUS.com, you could read it there. There's really two articles in particular, well, three, of extreme importance. That one, that's on HomelandSecurityUS.com. The article that is on Steve Quayle's website, the Guerrilla Economist, his latest article, which concerns why Syria is not, it's not what you think and it's not what you've been told. Folks, you've got to read that article as well. And the third one is, and I'm going to cite Michael Reagan on this one, Building on the Kernel of Truth at the American Thinker, which was published last October. So those three articles should give you sufficient background as to what we're seeing right now. The clock is ticking. Right now, the clock is ticking, and it's not waiting for you or me or anyone else. The situation in the Middle East, and in particular Syria, has degraded dramatically over the last 10 days, and specifically since the news of the chemical weapons was made known. Now, this is going to change everything. This is going to give more momentum to the McCains, the Obamas, the globalists of the world. Folks, if you think this is just simply about the Middle East, you're not thinking big enough. You've got to think bigger. Take a few steps back, a lot of steps back, and look at the whole picture. This is about control of the entire globe, the entire world. This is for everything. This is for all of the marbles. And here's, we right now are looking at, Stephen, and I can't, the only thing that I can add to what you said is just put an exclamation point after what you said. Because here's the situation. We are facing right now, this administration, these psychopaths, these globalists, or these psychopaths that are being operated by globalists, of sending cruise missiles into Syria. For what? What are they going to hit? Are they going to strike the weapons, chemical weapons depots that are ferreted away in these residential neighborhoods? I don't think so. But just by doing so, the retaliation by Russia, Syria is a proxy nation state of Russia. So by doing so, Putin has put us on notice. If you do this, there will be hell to pay from Russia. By the way, Putin, and folks, you've got to understand this, Putin is head of the largest oil company in Russia. Russia is the world's largest exporter of oil. This is about oil and the economy. The globalists want the implementation. Stephen, correct me if I'm wrong, but the globalists ultimately want the implementation of a new world order, a new world economy, and that is what we're seeing here. It's not about Middle Eastern politics. It's not about Islam versus Christianity at the bigger level, that is. The bigger level is domination of the entire planet, control of the entire planet, and subjugation of all people to the globalist agenda. Is that what you're getting, Steve?
Absolutely. And Jesus said it this way, the whole world lies in the evil one. The whole world. Jesus said the love of money is the root of all evil. The control of money is the control of all evil. And this is about money. And listen, there's no bigger money in the world than, as they say in Texas, oil. Okay? Oil. And the oil, as they say in Montana or other places, the oil is listen, somebody once said this, oil is the lubricant that makes it all work. We've got stuff that we don't even need fossil fuels anymore, but as long as there are lemmings that will pay for energy, there are guys that want to take the last dollars of the lemmings. Sounds like a new title for something. The last lemmings. So what we're seeing right now, Doug, is in order for the globalists to succeed, they need a global economic systemic meltdown. And this is, again, what most people don't recognize. Here's a statement that those of you that maybe are unfamiliar with terrorism or very, how should I say that, you lack depth to understand it. Terrorism is always a funded and always a foreign extension of someone's policy. It is always, always funded as an extension of someone's foreign policy. Now, look, how is it that Al-Qaeda is now funded by the United States of America? How is it the Muslim Brotherhood is funded by the United States of America? And ask yourself this. There were no problems in Iraq before Saddam Hussein was murdered. There was no issues in Libya, and all of the talk of them being murdered because they wanted to break away from the dollar. Well, they were little guys that the bullies could beat up, but China's breaking away from the dollar. BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, and China are breaking away from the dollar. And now you've got the need for a global reset. And I got news for you. That's not going to be, at the Iraqi dinar fun fest for those people that think somehow that that's a good investment. I'm not mocking. I'm just saying this, that the reset will only come after there's a whole lot of death. And Doug, I wrote books years ago. When I first got into this whole thing in the preparedness movement, as one of the founders of the PrEP movement 30-some years ago, I can tell you this. I wrote my very first catalog called Security and Survival Products Catalog, and the whole first, 80, 90, maybe 100 pages were nothing about nuclear war and the lack of American civil defense. Right now, ladies and gentlemen, well, we have Russians basically making sure we're abiding by the START Treaty, strategic arms reduction talks, and all the different treaties that we've signed on to. We are not equally allowed access to some of the most critical control centers in Russia, like the Yamanato complex. And so what's fascinating to me, Doug, is it almost appears that we have surrendered behind the scenes. And there's a book, a Whole Earth catalog. I held it. I hadn't had time to copy it for you, Doug, and Beata, I was going to send you a copy, too, of the article. But it's got on the front of it, it's red. It looks like a communist flag, and it's called Amorus, A-E-M-R-U-S-S. And the author goes on to explain how, and this is in 1984, ding, 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 1984. That's 29 years ago. 1984, that the article is in the Whole Earth catalog. And the gist of it is that what he was proposing appears to at least be partially in place, that the Russians and their higher levels of intelligence and the U.S. higher levels of intelligence, meaning the agencies, et cetera, would make a deal to pretty much merge and control the world and turn it into a global fascist domination zone. Then China got wind of it and basically got together with Russia and said, look, we're not going to let the West do this. They can tell you right now that China is not playing games. China has declared the United States to be a mortal enemy. That's not Steve. That's the Chinese statement of their generals that was just carried. I carried an article less than 2 or 3 days ago on my website. So how is it? Ladies and gentlemen, we face thermonuclear, a first strike, if not terrorist, nuclear adventures on our soil, and yet you as an American veteran are a terrorist. I, as an American Christian talk show host, I'm a terrorist by their standards. The founding fathers are terrorists. The Constitution that most of the military who's still active, who were sworn in years ago, are terrorists. Christianity is now the target of opportunity. Jesus is the most maligned, slandered, and if the Christians would even have the testicular fortitude to say, you're talking about the Son of God, and the minute somebody says God has no children, who would retort back to that, you say, but Solomon was wise and your writings acknowledge his wisdom, and he's talking about what is God's name or what is his Son's name. You see, here's the thing. The bottom line is nobody told us how this was going to play out any clearer than Jesus Christ. When John wrote the book of Revelation while he's in exile on the Isle of Patmos, it was the revelation of Jesus. And I find it interesting, Doug. It's one of the most pronounced blessings of those who read it and keep the words of this book, and yet people just dismiss it and they want to put it on the same par as Nostradamus. I got news for you. It's insanity. But the point is, now we're at the place, we've got wars and rumors of wars, and I want to get into the race riots and the race wars. Almost 15 years ago when I did Coast to Coast, it was one of those shows looking forward in the future or whatever, and when I was asked what's coming down, I said we're going to have a civil war and a race war in this country, and I think I quoted Matthew 24, when Jesus said, nations shall rise against nation. Most people think that country against country. That's not what that means. It means ethnos or ethnicity against ethnicity. And so the thing is, when you've got a guy who was in the DHS, I understand he's been let go, but basically in charge of ammo and weapons procurement, and he's got a blog about we got to kill white people even though it goes against our Christian principles. What's wrong with that picture, ladies and gentlemen? All is redefined in the world of gobbledygook and commie speak, okay? Commie speak is exactly what's going on. You know, Jeremiah, I'm no Jeremiah, but I can tell you this. I understand how it must have made him incredibly crazy to basically have to hear those calling good evil and evil good. So much so that the Lord just said to Jeremiah, Jeremiah, your heart is going to break because of the iniquity of this people, yet you still must warn them. And, you know, I'm glad Jeremiah did it. God said that to me, and I said, I don't want to do it, Lord. I'm not kidding you. I said, no offense, Lord, your people are too tough. I've said that so many times, you've heard me say that. Yet there are people that truly love the Lord Jesus that turn in the show worldwide. And for that reason, we're warning them. Ladies and gentlemen, those of you who are believers in the Lord Jesus Christ, you have nothing to fear. Jesus said, fear not, I am with you even to the end of the age. Those of you who are going to hell, what has it truly profited you as the days tick by? And gee, you haven't had your download yet. Maybe your new body's been promised to you, and I'm talking about genetic alteration, genetic promises of eternal life, and you're getting older and older and older, and even you now see that the smile on your granddaughter's face or grandson's face or your daughter or your son's face may not be there that much longer because of all of your shenanigans. And I'm telling you this, Doug, the word for tonight is repent. And then it's return to me with all your heart, saith the Lord, and I will heal you. The nation is too sick. I received a prophecy I won't put up on my website because a guy is just a wishful thinking prophet, and he's trying to quote 2 Chronicles 7:14. I was saved 42 years ago, and Jimmy and Carol Webb had a thing going across the country called If My People, trying to get God's people to repent and turn away from their sin there. 42 years, and we've had 42 years of, I'd say, grace, and yet now we've gone from grace to disgrace. The nation of the United States is absolutely a paper tiger. That's why I'm telling you this again. I wouldn't say this unless the Holy Ghost has prompted me. The Lord said to you, the U.S. military, you are going to face staggering defeats like you have never experienced before. This isn't psychological operations. It's a thus saith the Lord, because you have declared war against me and my people, saith the Lord, yet shall your defeat be assured. And I got to tell you something, Doug. I tremble when I say that, because that's not me and any issues I've got with them. That's the living God. And the Lord has a controversy with the United States of America. It's turned over to judgment. When the righteous rule, the people rejoice. When the wicked rule, the righteous mourn. So the mourning and sadness is a direct relationship, and we have no one to blame first and foremost but the puppets in the pulpit, and I call them pukes, okay? The pukes in the pulpit, these spineless jellyfish, since some people like that term, that have brought us to destruction. The CFR members, the ones who want a purpose-driven church, yeah, right out and over the cliff. Jesus Christ does not share his glory with another. And so when, all roads lead to heaven, all that stuff, that's not true. That is the world's attempt at one world religion, and God is at war with it, has been since the Garden of Eden, and will be at war with it until the second coming of Jesus, even into the millennium. There will still be those who, though Jesus Christ, the Son of God, rules the world from Jerusalem, will not want to yield to his lordship and kingship. Everybody who's listening to this broadcast worldwide should read this second psalm, because the second psalm lays it out. The kings of the earth set themselves against the Lord and against his anointed, saying, we will not have this man, and I'm putting in who it is, Jesus, rule over us. So that's where we're at tonight, Doug, and that's why it's so critical that people understand. We're talking about the U.S. economy is going to face systematic meltdown, and all that we've seen, and most people don't know this, V drew it to my attention, but the Eurex was closed last night for an hour or so, so we've had the NASDAQ down, we've had the Eurex down, European exchange down, we've had Amazon, eBay, Comcast, and maybe I'm missing somebody else down, and so we're in a position now to say who's doing this for what reason. Can I ask everybody a question? What would those of you who have invested in stocks done if today you found out that $5.17 trillion had disappeared and that it was being the official party line, that there had been a cyber attack? What would you have done? What will you do when you are locked out of your brokerage accounts like those at MF Global were, even though you were told you have designated accounts with silver bullion or gold bullion or whatever you have? I had a doctor come in, one of the smartest, and he's a pretty rich guy, probably worth $20 million into my store today, and he sold some silver physical to go into ETFs. Now, this guy should know better, okay? I told him, for the record, I told him not to do one thing, and he lost $1 million in it. And I said, look, I won't say his name, but doctor, when you do this, you're absolutely playing in their game. And an ETF is an exchange-traded fund. And an exchange-traded fund basically has no guarantee that they possess the precious metals they claim to have. Does that make sense, Doug?
Absolutely.
So it's called liar's paper. If Joe and I are issuing IOUs and there's nothing to back the IOUs and you're booking the IOUs as an asset, well, that would be called fraud. But every day in America, bigger fraud than that takes place, and so that's where we're at. We're at the quintessential junction where someone was testing markets. Now, here's what I believe is going on. Every single vendor upon the Internet who takes and does commerce, whether through PayPal or their own online service, okay, is at risk of having those accounts robbed. I believe when those big guys go down, it's because software is being placed into the software or data stream beyond firewalls or behind control, and it's with full anticipation that when the point is done, let's say Company A, we won't pick on any of the two that went down, but Company A is a multi-$100 billion company, and they keep $5 or $10 billion in different accounts around the world. What happens when that instantly disappears? What happens when the people are locked out of their accounts? What happens when your credit cards don't work? All these things are in the making. V has warned about that months and months ago. And when he put up Syria, it's not what you think or what you're being told. What his sources are saying, Doug, is the same thing your sources. It's all about power, and you can add energy. And if you control the energy, you decide who lives and dies in Eastern and Western Europe this winter, which is supposedly going to be really bad. When you talk about controlling the flow of gasoline, this country comes to a standstill. And ladies and gentlemen, they not only want martial law, they're going to make sure they initiate the events that bring it about.
Absolutely. And you know what, Steve? And people really, in my view, they've got to understand how big this is, the enormity of what we're seeing here. Now, there's one thing I do want to mention that was mentioned to me right before showtime. This is a grave concern of our mutual friend and a man I respect a lot in terms of providing information. But he said that he's very concerned because there's the public opinion against our involvement in Syria is waning. In fact, Syria intervention is even less popular than Congress. This is from a poll, a Reuters poll that it was issued or it was done between the 19th and 23rd of August, the very same week that horrific reports emerged strongly suggesting that Assad had used chemical weapons against his own people. Well, this poll, 25% said they supported intervention if Assad used chemical weapons. That means 75% is against this. Now, if public opinion, Steve, and this is something that I think everyone should should think about. If public opinion would prevent the globalists or this administration at the hands of the globalists from going after Assad, what will be, what will happen next? Will there be a blowback because the agenda of the globalists, the timetable is not stopping? So, what's their plan B? For example, is it a nuke somewhere? Is it something else? That's something that we have to watch very carefully because this is asymmetrical warfare at its finest. And that was the only thing that I was cautioned about out of the ordinary tonight was, hey, the public opinion is not with this cruise missile attack. So what if that does, and let me ask you this, Steve, what if that does prevent us attacking Syria? Will this not play out in some other dastardly way?
Well, when you're dealing with bastards, and I use that word in the context of making religious people upset, but I use it in the terms of biblical historic precedent, a bastard in the Bible especially was someone who was illegitimate, but it was first used by God when he was speaking to the prophet Enoch and stating that the fallen angels and their spawn were bastards. So I consider these, if you will, the Rosemary's babies of fallen angels that are running the world. Now, I'm not being facetious in that. I'm just telling it that's how it is. We're at the point where the press, there's too many, quote, issues that are coming in and collapsing on the president. Obviously, when the Egyptians themselves are saying they have proof that our president is funding al-Qaeda in the Muslim Brotherhood, the thing is that the Egyptian Brotherhood, the thing that is happening is wars, they need a diversion, Doug, okay? Because already, you've probably seen on InfoWars, Alex Jones is the impeach Obama and heard the stories of the Missouri cops, I think it was, arresting the peaceful protesters who are just expressing their constitutional right of free speech. And, well, I guess they backed off. But the calls for impeachment, the NSA scandal is getting bigger and bigger. And, ladies and gentlemen, I want to share something with you tonight, that when the fires first started in Denver, Colorado, the fires started concurrently with the announcement that there were joint training sessions going on between Spetsnaz, Russian Special Forces, and the different branches of U.S. military. Hawk took them on full bore. We had eyewitness accounts of people seeing Russian Hind helicopters landing in the area where the fires started burning. And so we're talking about full-scale asymmetrical warfare. And what's important for people to understand, this is Russian war policy 60 years later being carried out in the now. I will be sending you, Doug, and you'll probably want to use it all, but I had a research assistant, Kim, go out and check all of the most famous deserters in Russian's history, everybody from Oleg Kalugin to Golitsyn to Suvorov to Vasily Mitrokhin, the KGB archivist, and to a T, to a man. These are the greatest sources of counterintelligence that the West has ever received. There's what they detailed, some of them 20, 30 years ago, is what's happening right now. Yuri Bezmenov. These men are saying this is how it will play out. This is how it is playing out. But now you've got multiple factions fighting for the New World Order. You know, obviously a house divided against itself cannot stand. Not only is an America a divided house, but the U.S. military, all the men who took their oaths to the Constitution of the United States have been replaced, early outed, killed, murdered, etc. I can tell you one thing, that if people believe that the Navy SEALs were just basically a casualty of war, they were a casualty of a planned assassination. And the father of one of them is basically screaming loud and clear, and he's absolutely correct. So the American people, unfortunately, Doug, because they didn't stand up earlier, their voice is now diminished, and it's become just basically a bunch of people arguing on the social media or email, and they who could have stood up and should have stood up never stood up by saying we should do something. And I ask people, when they say me, they basically want me to do something, and I say, but what have you done? Where have you been? I'm inundated with prophets. I broke off a friendship of 20 years with a guy who is a Messianic Jew because, you know, he and I used to be friends. The guy stayed in my house, but he was basically lecturing me, and I said, brother, I have no time for your lectures. This is at the end of the age as we know it is coming upon us. And so, Doug, people are absolutely now coming on the scene saying something like this: thus saith the Lord, if America doesn't repent, it will go to war with Russia. Well, you don't need thus saith the Lord when that's right in the headlines. Vladimir Putin say, this will not end well. You know, we're going to protect our interests in Syria. So what I'm saying is there's a difference between what I would call prophecy after the fact versus warning ahead of the fact. All prophecy is to comfort, exhort, and edify. It's to warn. It's to build up. It's to get people to change their heart. But, you know, Jesus said it this way: to the Jews who were giving him a bad time. And if you want to know what basically really got the Lord Jesus Christ the most upset, it was with the religious arguments coming from religious people professing to be righteous like the Pharisees or Sadducees and not having any personal righteousness, willing to stone a woman taking adultery but having just slept with a whore the night before. So, you know, be careful when you start throwing rocks that it doesn't come back and hit you in the head. What I'm saying is this: we are at the point where we have absolutely, in my opinion, and I believe that those of you who know the heart of the Lord Jesus Christ and the heart of the living God, we have absolutely gone beyond the no turning back as a nation point. It's over. The judgment is secure. That does not mean that God will not protect, and he most certainly will protect his people. He'll lead them to the places of refuge. He'll send his angels. He'll do everything he's done and more. The glory of the latter will be greater than the former. But I got news for you. This is not the time for religious arguments. This is the time for cold, hard observation and listening to what they say. I will tell you one thing I learned about Russians in dealing with a couple of them. They don't, now in espionage, yeah, everybody lies, but they have a statement. They tell you what they are going to do if we do this. We're the ones that mess everything up with subterfuge and intrigue and try and, you know, make everybody buddy-buddy. Let me give a good example. A couple of friends of mine are vets, and they were in, I believe, either Georgia or Alabama. Arthur, if you're listening, correct me on this. And they were out in the woods, and the joint operation taking place between the Russian and U.S., they were setting up, I guess, a checkpoint with a machine gun nest and everything else. Well, the Americans had walked away, and one of the guys that was with my friend Arthur spoke Russian, and he heard the Russians make this statement, those stupid Americans, they don't realize as soon as we're done with the people they want us to kill, we kill them too. Now, I've heard that 2 and 3 times in the last week alone from different postings from different people who have interviewed and talked to Russians. So what I'm saying is that we are now at a point where, again, the greatest double cross in history is taking place. Ladies and gentlemen, let me make it clear, there are no political solutions. Every one of those guys in Congress and Senate has been bought off, paid off, or compromised. Every one. And the Spetsnaz plan will be to waste every one of those guys at the right time. They have a real simple plan, Doug. They get you to betray your country, and then they kill you because they know they can't trust you. If you betrayed the country you've been brought up in, you're not going to, love the country that you're currently supposedly yielding your obedience to.
Nice. Yeah, and we're dealing with this, obviously. In a larger picture of this, Steve, is population reduction, eugenics, and all of this. We're dealing with psychopaths, but people, bringing this back around to the current situation, the current headlines today, I'm not sure, Steve, how many people realize that there are somewhere between 130 to 150,000 dead Syrians right now. I mean, 100. Now think about that number: 130 to 150,000 dead Syrians since the start of the so-called civil war, which the West really, once again, folks, it wasn't a civil war. This was a planned, or is a planned, overthrow of Assad. There's over 1 million refugees. And a lot of them are Christians and Alawites that are going from Syria into Iraq. Folks, how bad, and Steve, how bad does it have to be in Syria for for the average normal person? And I'm talking like, think of a middle-class person in Syria or in America, that equivalent, for you to leave everything behind and rush into Iraq or flee into Iraq. How bad does what you're fleeing have to be for you to flee into Iraq? And, of course, we had the assassinations of the Alawites here recently. But all of this together, and two, in addition to this, and Steve, you can speak on this as well, that while Congress is away, or most of them are away for summer recess, we've got the holiday weekend coming up, the Labor Day weekend. People's heads are not into what's taking place here. This is a time for mischief. This is a time where, just like in the passage of the Federal Reserve, when Congress was away, there was no quorum. I mean, this right now, what we're seeing right now, is a time, the most dangerous time, I believe, in the history of the world, at least in the recent history of the world. What do you think about that?
I concur with you, Doug. You've just nailed it on the head. And plus, we're just getting the statements that the United States, or that the president is going to sign the United Nations Small Weapons Ban Treaty. Here's what people don't understand. The United Nations Security Council is composed of, obviously, Russia and China. There are Russian and Chinese troops, and they know everybody who's got a gun. And some of you guys that think that, I got it, or I lost them when my canoe tipped over. They don't buy that, okay? Here's what's happening. We are a brain-dead and controlled society to the point that if you don't turn off the TV and start looking, let me say this, Doug, do you think most people would even turn off the TV if they know they have been controlled and they're being controlled by infrasound, by subliminal messages that are saying resistance is futile, surrender, they only want for your good, and the campaign will be come with us. The Russians or Chinese will say, and we'll let you live. You'll be our slaves, but you get to live. The children. Let me talk about the school thing, because this really, I'll say it this way, infuriates me beyond measure. When I first started getting reports from across the United States of supposed booksellers and Russian booksellers, there were two different themes. One was Latvian students that had a placard around their neck for Southwestern, and then the others, even some saying that they had bodyguards and they had dossiers. A dossier is just simply a cheat sheet on who you are, where you're born, where your parents. Intelligence gathering operations. Well, all the nincompoops go on Facebook and said, well, my police chief said that this is all just a legitimate deal. Well, your police chief is a dumbass, ladies and gentlemen, if he said that, because you can't explain the mismatching. And I have law enforcement friends across the country that said, Steve, we would have busted them in an instant if their registration doesn't match their title or their license plates. I mean, that's the first thing they look for, stolen cars. Yet the apologists, and here's what I'm trying to get across tonight, Doug, if I can speak to the entire law enforcement across the United States of America, those of you who are being told you're going to be, well taken care of, your families will be used as hostages against you. Let me say that again. Your families will be used as hostages against you. Remember all the exercises over the years with schools where the children are being taught to obey the authorities. They'd be put on buses and taken to a safe place. This whole Sandy Hook falsity, all of the stuff, they're going to take your children. And again, this is so amazing, People say, well, do you think they're going to come take my gold away? I said, well, maybe the question should be, do you think they're coming to blow you away? In other words, it's the stuff mentality versus your life mentality. Does that make sense, Doug? People are so concerned. I mean, does this mean I won't get to watch The Young and the Restless next week? I mean,
exactly.
The inaneness of it all is so overwhelming to me that I got to tell you, I have to pray, and I thank God for all you intercessors that, Lord, keep my heart right, because we've got to get across to people by the power of the Holy Ghost, breaking through the denial, breaking through the normal biasy, breaking through the mind control, that this stuff is real and it's happening.
You know what, Steve, if I can add a personal story here really quick, just to tell people and tell you, we haven't shared this, or I haven't shared this with you, to let people know how far advanced the dossiers on people are and the intelligence gathering operations are. Yesterday, I met with a extended family member whose job is that he flies to numerous states all across the country. 2 weeks ago, he lost his wallet. He had flown to Nebraska, stayed at a hotel, and somebody stole his wallet out of his car. So he had a problem. He had a plane ticket, but coming back home to where he lived, he didn't have any identification when he got to the boarding window or to board the plane. He was pulled aside by the TSA. A DHS officer came down, and this is the most incredible thing I've heard, Steve. The DHS officer, it was in front of a computer screen, and he was on the opposite side, asked several standard questions, name, address, and so on and so forth, but then proceeded to ask him very specific questions. For example, where did you go to high school? And he named the high school. And the DHS officer said, what was your school's mascot? And of course, he had it right there on the screen. He was questioned about, give me the last name of one of your neighbors. And bang, it was right there on the screen. You talk about zeroing in and the advancement of the information that is being held on every American citizen right now. When you mentioned dossier, that made me think of that. So understand that we are so far down this trail. We're so far down. It's just incredible. So people aren't getting the enormity of this. They're not understanding how enormous this is. They're not understanding their fate. So, but most importantly right now, look, you know what, Steve? We are in a proxy war at several levels, and domestically or foreign, and then domestically here. Look at what's happening here. You mentioned about the race riots. Well, where are all of these Syrian and Middle Eastern refugees going to go? Well, isn't it convenient that we're going to be talking about modifying or providing amnesty for illegal immigrants and aliens here? We're going to be balkanized from what's happening over there. People don't think that what happens over there is going to affect us over here, and it damn well will.
Well, and absolutely. I mean, Doug, I remember when you and I first started doing, and most people don't realize this, but we started our friendship with the HQ, what was it called, the HQ Intel Alert?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Hagman Quayle Intel Alert. In those days, you and I were both, if I remember right, you and I were both doing a lot of talk radio on Goodnight Buffalo and different places around the country, but warning about Buffalo, New York specifically. So much so, ladies and gentlemen, that the place that Doug had identified, that was the origin of a lot of death threats and operations against me, and a lot of threats and operation against Doug. Well, it was so not received by the pundits on the board who evidently they knew more than us, but George Bush even talked about, after he had lost the presidency, he basically stated, or forgive me, not lost it, but was done, he basically stated a couple months after that we almost, meaning the United States, almost bombed Buffalo, New York. That was the armory that Doug had identified. Remember that, Doug?
I sure do. Yeah,
and so
it still stands.
Without giving away the farm, ladies and gentlemen, what we're trying to tell you is this: brave men and women, well placed, are giving us their last warnings that they can give. And Doug, you know this. A lot of your friends and a lot of my friends have basically said, Steve, why do you? And one of them said, why do you and Doug go to such an effort to try and basically, one guy said, Steve, you'd be nice to call them morons. And I said, well, I got to do this. It's my calling in Jesus. But he said, why do you guys go to so much effort and to try and warn the people who absolutely do not want to see it? And I said, some do. And that was my answer, Doug. That's my only answer. Some do, and we're both trying to be obedient to walk through the doors that the Lord has opened. Because since you've been doing the Hagman and Hagman, you and Joe, I mean, a lot of people have given their heart to Jesus around the world. And people don't know this, but there are times when Hagman and Hagman is the #1 talk radio show worldwide over some of the biggest guys that are on talk radio. Is that a truth?
Yeah, it is, and I'm not sure exactly how we've done that, but yeah, it certainly is.
Well, it's the favor of the living God, because Christians, the ones that are waking up, are trying to get the best, They're trying to get the best,
Well, and what we try to do is, through our guests like you and Pastor Langford and Greg Evenson and others, we try to bring as much useful information, actionable intelligence to the listeners as possible, and combine that, of course, with the living Word. So, this is Steve. You say it so well. It's a battle of principalities of darkness. It's not just an earthly battle. This is a heavenly battle as well. We're fighting a heavenly battle. So, if we can save one person through our efforts, one more person, if we can buy one more day, it's all worth it, at least in my view.
Amen, brother. And Mickey just sent me an email, and we better deal with this too. He said, what about schools requiring 3-day packs for incoming kids? Well, 3 days, Mickey writes, Steve, a bus can go a long way in 3 days. They're coming for the kids. Why would they take the kids? Well, you've got slavery. You've got a whole nation of future citizens that you can mold and control. Plus, for all the sickos out there, you got an infinite playpen for perversity and the stuff that goes along with child rape. And unfortunately, Doug, can I say something? I don't believe that anybody should go into this time period without reading the book, The Rape of Van King. I think this is like, can I say this? This is like the worst time in history. Jesus says that there's never been a time like it, nor would be again, except the days be shortened. There'd be no flesh left alive. Yet for the elect's sake, those days are going to be shortened. And we've got basically evil on steroids. We've got the most in-your-face attempt to destroy every single barrier that the living God had ordained, that he had put into place. And it's war. It's war. And yet, this is like, can I say something? This is like people thinking that if they just are kind and in denial, they'll be like the marshmallow or the Pillsbury Doughboy, and when anybody puts a finger in them, it'll just bounce out because they're so jolly. Now, there you got it. Somebody bayoneting the Pillsbury Doughboy, okay, or the Michelin Tire Man, being machine gunned. The point is that I just got a picture of that, by the way. The thing is that there is such a abject denial of reality Again, my sources have told me that once this thing goes, that they mean the people that will bring in and institute martial law, Department of Homeland Security, military, they're going to wait a good 72 to 96 hours because they want the full ravaging of the country, especially in the larger cities, to take place. I mean, there is no place to go except looting when there is no money. There is no place to go except looting when all the banks are closed. And not only that, but there's going to be the gangs that have been preparing for these days have been hidden and covered by elements in our government that have been very well armed that are going to basically be told, it's killing time, boys. And when that's unleashed, that's what they're going to do. And then those guys who have been thinking that they're going to somehow get a get-out-of-mayhem card free get mowed down too, so much so that the military and all of their aerial assets will be used against American citizens. When Greg Evenson said that about yard farming, and I said it from the Air Force, a guy that was in my office from Northcom, people mocked us, they ridiculed us. I mean, we were like scorned and just beyond anything. Now you've got people starting to, let's just say this, dirty their diapers in some cases because, and that's the nicest way I know how to say it, because there are jets strafing or helicopter gunships going over them, hovering over their houses. Ladies and gentlemen, if you got that going on, trust me, they're locking you in for their fire control panel. So, it goes on and on, Doug. Yet now, Syria is the serious card in play. What will Israel do? Listen, the minute Israel goes against Syria or we go against Syria, Israel has to decide to go against Iran. Iran has made it clear that they are ready for strategic war. Iran does have submarines. They do have super sunburns. They have PT boats, and we're going to lose an aircraft carrier, and we're going to lose a lot of men because of the arrogance of the U.S. military and believing they can make war against a holy God and prevail.
Amen. With that, we're going to go to the break at the top of the hour. Folks, you're listening to the Hagman and Hagman Report on this Monday, August 26, 2013. We'll be right back with our special guest, Steve Quayle, as it seems like we're on the verge of a World War III scenario with Syria. A lot of news coming out of Israel about Saudi Arabia backing, getting in out there with the U.S. in trying to stop Russia from a counterattack if the U.S. attacks. They call it the doomsday scenario. Also, Secretary John Kerry made some comments today. We'll get into that on the other side. You're listening to the Hagman and Hagman Report. Stay with us.
Folks, Doug Hagman here. Want to tell you, if there was ever a time in your life for you to prepare, it would be now. And please, ladies and gentlemen, go to HomelandSecurityUS.com. There on the right-hand side, you will see a link to AmericanSurvivalWholesale.com. That's AmericanSurvivalWholesale.com. Folks, click on that link. Click on the store link for American Survival Wholesale. There you will find long-term food supplies. And there are some incredible bargains there. In fact, a 3-month emergency food supply by Linden Farms. Bonus, you buy 2, get 1 at 50% off. That's only $900 for 3 months of food. And I'll tell you, the cost per portion is unbelievable. They've got many, many packages to suit your budget, to suit your needs. But ladies and gentlemen, this is a Christian company. The owners are Christian. They want to see us survive. That's so important. Folks, please do yourself a favor. Look at your inventory. Look at your pantry. Get prepared. Prepare today. Contact our friends at AmericanSurvivalWholesale.com. Contact them today, tomorrow, but do it soon. We don't know how long we have. That's AmericanSurvivalWholesale.com, AmericanSurvivalWholesale.com. Hi folks, Doug Hagman here. You might know me as the co-host from the Hagman and Hagman Report, or as a frequent guest on Coast to Coast AM with George Norrie. If you're like me, you're tired and confused over today's headlines. You just don't know where to turn for accurate, concise information about really what's going on, what's truly going on in today's society. If you don't know where to turn for accurate, well-researched, and properly vetted news, I've got a suggestion. In fact, it's a requirement. Bookmark Canada Free Press. That's CanadaFreePress.com on the internet. It's just not for Canada. It's for news across the world. Judy McLeod, founding editor, has put together a vast array of talented writers like Kelly O'Connell, Daniel Greenfield, Dr. Eilena Johnson-Powell, a lot of guest columnists, very talented writers. Folks, that's Canada Free Press at CanadaFreePress.com. Now mobile friendly. Follow on Facebook, because without America, there is no free world.
It's hard to imagine when things are going reasonably well, just how quickly things can change. But what would it take? Economic collapse? Massive crop failure? Chemical or biological attack? So many situations could find you in the grocery looking to pick up food for your family only to find that the shelves are empty. There's nothing. Don't let that happen. Act today to make sure that if it ever comes to that, you and your family will be provided for. Visit freezedryguy.com to look at the wide variety of survival foods available. Freeze-dried foods from the Freeze Dry Guy store longer, rehydrate faster, are nutritionally superior to, and taste better than any other long-term storage food available. Visit freezedryguy.com or call toll-free 866-404-3663. freezedryguy.com.
You want answers? I think I'm entitled. You want answers? I want the truth. You can't handle the truth.
And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to this Monday, August 26th edition of the Hagman and Hagman Report. We are joined by our very special guest, Steve Quayle. Before the break, talked about Secretary of the State John Kerry gave a speech today talking about weapons of mass destruction being used in Syria as a pretext to the upcoming Syrian war that we will soon be witnessing. And then one of the comments he made in his statement here, he said that last week, the UN investigation will not determine who used the chemical weapons, only whether such weapons were used, a judgment that is already clear to the world. And that kind of stuck with me when I heard it live. I did watch it live. It's just basically saying it doesn't matter who used them. The fact that they were used is enough for us to go in there, regardless if they were used by people who we backed and the weapons we put in there to use in the first place. Also, from Israel, or the Times of Israel, doomsday scenario in Syria. With Arab support, Western nations prepare for possible military strike. Assad warns of chaos and instability as a result. Now it talks about Western nations and their Arab allies are actively planning a military strike. This would be the first show of force by an outside power since the Syrian civil war began in 2011. The Saudi-owned Sharak al-Wassat is known for its hostility toward the Assad regime, reports that in the face of overwhelming international pressure, Assad came to an understanding with the United Nations that will allow this fact-finding UN team to find out who did the attack as early as Monday. The Syrian government has publicly accused terrorists and rebel forces of launching the deadly attack, but regardless, the U.S., the U.K., France has already decided that Assad gesture is too little too late. The Syrian regime already had enough time to destroy critical evidence. And here we are.
Steve, I'll tell you what, Steve, welcome back, by the way. SteveQuayle.com is his website. Steve, Syria is not going to be like Libya, Egypt, Iraq, Afghanistan. Syria, when this goes, it's going to explode, not implode. Don't you agree?
Absolutely, because again, look, even though Russia has sent some of its most sophisticated weapon systems, they've also sent their technicians, which is another name for Russian military that will control everything related to the high-tech weapons. But I think what people are missing missing the point on is that, public opinion may be changing towards Syria, but if they understood that this is not a clear matter that Assad would be crazy. First of all, military munitions, I saw the reports, 155 millimeter howitzer shells loaded with nerve gas. Then I saw the reports and I saw, there were no 155 millimeter howitzer shells. They were basically polyethylene containers of chemicals used for makeshift chemical weapons. And then the United Nations team going in to verify comes under sniper fire. You have to ask yourself, again, Doug, here's what people are missing. The globalists, I'm going to make this as plain as I ever made it. God help me, please, Lord. This is the globalist attempt to rid the planet of 90% of its population. That means that they want 500 million people left. Well, even the scriptures teach that a third and a third are going to go, so basically you're going to have pretty close to a third of what was, a third of what's left, and then a final third going, so they need a global conflagration. The Antichrist who takes the position of Jesus Christ, Jesus said, I came, you receive me not. Another will come claiming to be me, and him you will receive. Antichrist means takes the place of Jesus Christ. So the point is they need a global conflagration. They need to call it Armageddon. They need to bring on the man of peace, okay? And then the point is, then it even gets worse from there. We're only talking about Syria. We can't get into the other stuff coming because we can't get past the obvious. So I got an email from one of my friends, and she said that, public opinion is changing on Syria. Yeah, well, look at what's happening in Iraq right now. It's going backwards. What's happening in Libya? Going backwards. The entire destabilization in the Muslim world is underway. Saudi Arabia is scared to death, terrified of Iran. Saudi Arabia is one of the major players, and by the way, the benefactor of the current resident of the former, we'll call it the presidential palace now in Washington, D.C. One of the things, by the way, Doug, I find it's interesting, and we'll get to it maybe during this hour, is the plans for Spetsnaz to poison the water and the food in Washington, D.C., and to literally poison the Potomac. Well, I got news for you. They didn't even have to do that. The mental poisoning in that part of the country is unbelievable. Let me read this because this is something that I think people need to understand about Spetsnaz. Most people will hear you or I talk about it, or maybe read Jeff Nyquist's article. But here's a quote, again, from Bezmenov, and he said, the inside story of the Soviet Special Forces. Having within its sphere an organization like Spetsnaz and having tested its potential on numerous exercises, Soviet High Command came to the conclusion that Spetsnaz could be used with success not only against tactical but also against strategic nuclear installations like submarine bases, weapon stockpiles, aircraft bases, and missile launching sites. Spetsnaz could be used, too, they realized, against the heart and blood supply of the state, its source of distribution of energy, power stations, transformer stations, and power lines, as well as oil and gas pipelines and storage points, pumping stations and oil refineries. Putting even a few of the enemy's more important power stations out of action could present them with a catastrophic situation. Not only would there be no light, factories would be brought to a standstill, lifts would cease to work, those are elevators, the refrigeration installations would be useless, hospitals would find it almost impossible to function, blood stored in refrigerators would begin to coagulate, traffic lights, petrol pumps, and trains would come to a halt, computers would cease to operate. I would just like to, again, to draw back the attention to everyone that when the joint training exercises were announced at Fort Carson in Colorado, that's when all the forest fires started. I had eyewitnesses, Doug. I sent you their emails. They saw people in black Suburbans throwing out incendiary devices. I had fire forensic guys contact me from that area. They were actually working on the fire lines, saying, Steve, we found chemical components of stuff we've never seen before, and had to send it to get analyzed. Meanwhile, why is this critical? Well, for the people in northern Colorado, it becomes very critical because Denver becomes a provisional capital of the United States as soon as Washington, D.C. gets taken out. The idea of burning down the forests, everyone, is to deny anybody who would be a flea or a counterinsurgent who would be fleeing to the woods, or counterinsurgents, any access of hiding out. In other words, escape and evasion. Now we're seeing in San Francisco, which I think is very unique, the potential for the entire city of San Francisco to be without water, because I think the fire is within, 2 miles from the Hetch Hetchy Reservoir. And so the thing that I got to tell you, Doug, I go on record. I've been on record for years. You've had me on your show. Thank you, and you've been gracious. But this is full-scale gray terror, and now we're moving from gray terror into strategic nuclear launches. The Iranians obviously are not Iraq. This is what I'm trying to get across to people. The thing that even I think the scandalous high command in the U.S. military doesn't get is we're talking about principalities and powers. We're talking about one of the strongest supernatural entities behind Iran. It never basically just left. It just went dormant for whatever reason. But now we're dealing with something that basically is a kingdom-destroying empire. We're talking about, obviously, the Medo-Persian Empire. We're talking about that which destroyed Babylon. We're talking about if the United States is, and I believe with all my heart, it's Mystery Babylon. You can argue it until you're blue in the face, but, those that think that Babylon is going to be rebuilt on the plains of Shinar are grossly deceived. What they are is they're dispensationalists. They believe their own charts, and their charts are just inaccurate. The point being is that the United States fits the definition of Mystery Babylon. Before Richard Coombs passed away, he wrote the book America the Babylon, still the best thing ever written on it, America the Babylon. I think he gives, 100 or 200 reasons why America's Babylon. But the difference is, guess who destroys Babylon? The Persians and the Medes. God has stirred up the spirit of the Medes and the Persians. So I got to tell you something. Knowing ancient history, knowing the warfare in the supernatural realm, this is not child's play. They're going to get their, let's just say this, their burrows royally branded. They're going to get their you-know-what's kicked. And I'm talking about in the realms that they think that the gods of the Sumerians are on their side. The gods of the Sumerians, that's what they call the fallen angels, by the way, the U.S. military does, the ancient Sumerian gods. Those guys have as much contempt for humanity as their general, Lucifer, Satan, does, and we're going to see a full-scale heavenly conflict being carried out on earth, but it's also going to be visible. That which has been invisible is going to be made visible. I can't tell you how many emails I get of people having supernatural, demonic encounters, Doug. It's off the charts. It's just simply off the charts.
Now, that's interesting because I'm starting to get these emails as well, and this is new to me, Steve. With the exception of what you've told me and from your books, this is new to me. I've never seen the number of emails I've been getting about reports like this about some. What is this? Like a ripping of the veil of some type of veil between? Okay, all right. Well, that's. Wow.
This is what Jesus spoke about, that the gates of hell would not prevail. The gates of hell are opening, and you can call it Hellgate, Can I tell you something? The Democrats may have had their Watergate years ago, or the Republicans, but now they're going to get their Hellgate. And what's going to, when Jesus said the gates of hell will not prevail, well, it's not the gate that you got to worry about, it's what comes through the gate. It's not what is, it's like going to the zoo. You can say, well, gee, this rail will not prevail against me. Yeah, jump over the rail and see how hungry grizzlies, think you're in the millennium. By the way, I get a lot of preterists. Preterists believe that the book of Revelation's already been fulfilled and we're in the millennial reign of Jesus Christ. I'll give anybody a free ticket to San Diego Zoo, and they can go jump into the lion cage before feedings, and let's just see if the lion lays down with the lamb.
Yeah,
it's ridiculous. Everybody is, let's get back to Spetsnaz, because this is an important paragraph I've got to read, okay?
All right.
Talking about gray terror, that time right before what we're seeing now. That's what we're seeing, okay? The overture is carried out by agents of the Secret Service of Soviet satellite countries and by mercenaries recruited by intermediaries. The principal method employed at this stage is great terror. That is a kind of terror which is not conducted in the name of the Soviet Union. The Soviet Secret Services do not at this stage leave their visiting cards or leave other people's cards. The terror is carried out in the name of an already existing extremist group not connected in any way with the Soviet Union or in the name of a fictitious organization. The GRU, which is the military intelligence arm, reckons that in this period its operations should be regarded as natural disasters. I want to read that again. The GRU reckons that in this period of time its operations should be regarded as natural disasters, actions by forces beyond human control, mistakes by people, or as terrorist acts by organizations not connected with the Soviet Union. The terrorist acts carried out in the course of the overture require very few people, very few weapons, and little equipment. In some cases, all that may be needed is one man who has a weapon, nothing more than a screwdriver, a box of matches, or a glass ampule with something in it. Some of the operations can have catastrophic consequences. For instance, an epidemic of infectious diseases at some of the most important naval bases in the West could have the effect of having the combined naval might of the Soviet Union's enemies. See, this is what they've done. This I have to take my hat off. They have orchestrated it to such a point that the U.S. military has become so focused on its people, the taxpayers, and us, everybody who has basically been, a hardworking American citizen. We're now the enemies, and the enemies are laughing their rear ends off because they're so focused on us, they don't see what's being done to them. Again, I want to make this clear, Doug. This is so important. And W, if you're listening and, with your context, you ought to really make sure your friends in the military understand this. They are assigned specific assassins. In other words, you can call them Agent A, B, C through Z in whatever language you want, but Agent A, B, C through Z is assigned a specific military leader of specific rank. Everything that can be known about that leader who is assigned to the assassin is in memory. All of the habits, all of the proclivities, all of the travel plans, where the kids, grandkids, everything, all of it's known. So this is what's in play now, Doug. This is why I'm screaming at the top of my lungs. If you're on Facebook, again, I'll say this. I have yet to see someone make me a convincing article that they're there because Jesus put you there. It is an intelligence-gathering, self-replicating intel dossier that you're not only building on yourself but on your friends. Those of you that are absolutely taking pictures of everything you do from the moment you wake up to the moment you put on your makeup to the moment you go to bed, either by yourself or with someone else, and bragging about your sex exploits, that will all be used against you. And even it's interesting because V was on your show talking about that, how they're going to change the whole structure of credit rating and credit scores. And now did you see that they're going to basically look at who a person's Facebook accounts were? Ladies and gentlemen, that's a home run for V on that one.
Yeah, he's got that. Yeah, he got that one right. But by the way, Steve, you were mentioning Spetsnaz, and I'm not sure, and I know you're aware of this, but I'm not sure how many people are familiar with an old book by a GRU defector. He wrote under the pen name Victor Suvorov. And
Suvorov.
Okay, yeah, right. Now, the name of the book, folks, is Spetsnaz, the Inside Story of Soviet Special Forces. Now, in Chapter 15, in fact, on page 196, if you want to get right to the heart of it, he was talking about Great Terror, and he describes Great Terror is a series of large and small terrorist operations for the purpose of which is, before actual military operations begin, is to weaken the enemy's morale, create an atmosphere of suspicion, fear, and uncertainty, and divert attention. And then this I found extremely important: to divert attention of the enemy's armies and police forces to a huge number of different targets. And isn't that what we're seeing right now? I mean, this is we're being diverted. Our armies are being diverted. Our police forces are being diverted. Our attention is being diverted. And with regard to Syria, Steve, and this is something I really have to say, Syria, and we can, and I think it's safe to say that I don't think we should look at Syria as really being the main show here. This Syria is the flash bang of the Magic Act. This is where the events are set in motion, and it will be a catalyst to set the stage for things that will happen next. And what happens next is going to be the critical things. I mean, we're talking about the implementation of a new world order, a new economic order. And I don't think people understand the enormity of this, Steve. I really don't.
Well, they don't, Doug. They just simply don't. And I know this is not condescending. Look, Jesus said it this way: which of the prophets have your fathers not killed, okay? Nobody wants to receive real-time warning because it's the mind-controlled nature now to put it off until tomorrow, the next day, or the other. Let me just share for the first time in history what's going on, okay? You have the Russian Navy arriving at Pearl Harbor for what's called RIMPAC, the Russian Air Force participating in Red Flag for the first time ever, and all of these are the Russians are learning the elite training drills of the U.S. Navy and Air Force. Can I ask you this? What nation who basically claims to be still, how do I say this, a defender of freedom, would allow that to happen unless they've totally been sold out? Every one of the defectors, all the Russians that I interviewed after the breakup of the Soviet Union, all said the same thing. And I'll just paraphrase it. You stupid, stupid Americans. You sell your country out for peanuts. When we sell it out, we at least know how to make enough money to retire on the Black Sea. Okay? So what you've got, Doug, is every single thing. Admiral Jeremy Borda was murdered. He was the chief of naval operations, okay? When that happened years ago, they claimed he committed suicide with a shotgun. Yeah, right. We got a postcard, and basically the guy said he was a hit ordered by the CSEA of CFR, okay? Well, you know, that was covered up. Now you've got Navy SEALs being murdered. You've got the greatest attempt at destroying humanity going on from the death house. And by the way, that's what I will, from now on, refer to the place the president occupies as the death house, okay? My fear is it will turn into the slaughterhouse. Because, again, if the American people understood what is planned for them, Doug, as a parent, I don't know any parent that would not go absolutely crazy if their kids were taken from them, only to find out it had been a plan by their elected officials. Can I make it clear? Those of you that are still caught up in the Republican-Democrat paradigm, Tea Party, whatever, you're missing the point. You cannot cure the spiritual sickness of this country with a political solution. You cannot do it. You cannot even any longer hope to take your country back. America is given over to divine judgment. God has weighed this country in the balance. Someone said, well, why should I listen to you? You're just negative. Get the hell out of the country. I love this country. And while you've been such a weenie dipstick ice cream cone for the past 20 years, hiding under your anonymous this or your anonymous that, we've been trying to warn and to equip the saints for the times ahead. It's just like this, Doug. I can come on your show, B can come on your show, others can come on your show and say, you know, hey, you got to do this with your IRAs, your 401ks, your KEOs. The government's planning on taking it. We can come on and tell you there's going to be a cyber attack on the banks, and then, invariably, we will get the inane emails. Well, what should I do? Now, I'm not making fun of people, but what I'm saying is this. Even when Gerald Celente was talking about everything going on, he believed that a certain brokerage firm, MF Global, was trustworthy. Gerald's a bright guy. I think he's one of the smartest men in the world, in my opinion. I think he's got the most foresight in the world. But you see, we all make mistakes when we trust the old paradigm, not realizing that if you don't touch it, you don't own it. You know, again, how are people who have been welfare recipients going to respond when they don't get their the electronic draft into their account or whatever? I mean, you know how they're going to respond. How are people who have how are people who's going to be responding who've just been waiting for this? This is why you always, listen, here's how I say it. This is as nice as I can get tonight. The wolves always follow the caribou.
What?
You know, and the rich, yeah,
exactly.
I don't care if you live in a gated community. You know, it doesn't do any good if you live in a gated community if the guy's coming in there has got a D5 cat, you know, with a Ma Deuce, a 50 caliber belt-fed machine gun, you know, blast and everything. They blast first, go and pick up the pieces later. Or, you know, it doesn't do any good to have a Black Hawk or whatever helicopter or an Apache gunship firing from, 8 miles away because they've locked on their GPS coordinate, and you think, well, I don't see anybody coming down my driveway, and then boom, you're either with Jesus or you're in hell,
Yeah.
And so, I mean, seriously, I don't know if anybody would look at I did something today. I don't even know why I did. Well, I know why I did it. I put up a really beautiful flower shot. But then
I love it, by the way.
I said, and then the final thing I said, remember, there are no flowers in hell. And everything about a flower, the fragrance, the color, the beauty, it resonates life. Everything that mankind is doing now on the planet, it's about death. It's about control. It's about violating, if they're not happy having their fingers in places that only doctors check, for medical issues, they're not happy until they're reading your DNA with an electron microscope. They're not happy until they're reading your brainwaves. This is the total, and I guess I'm going to use a word I've never used before, but this is the total integrated rape of not only the human genome, but the human being. This is the absolute mockery of God's commensurate creation being picked apart by the carrion of hell, and I'm really struggling to put it into such a formidable way that I can get people's attention. I'll tell you what, they may want to pick my bones, but I'd sure like to make sure they're hors d'oeuvres before that day comes.
Well said. And one thing you said, Steve, about MF Global, about Gerald Celente, and I think people in general are stuck in this mindset. Something that was said to me last night when I was talking with my source. Past stability is not a measure of future stability. People are stuck in this mindset where, well, geez, my bank was fine before, for just as an example. It doesn't mean it's going to be fine tomorrow. Just like MF Global, we saw the biggest really theft in history with MF Global, and Gerald Celente got caught up in that. And as you said, he's a smart guy. And of course, they were segregated accounts. But this is going to be on a much larger scale here. I just got an email from someone. He said, well, why don't you talk in specifics as to what is going to happen? Well, I think we are. I mean, how do you answer that? I think we are. The game is about to shift. We're not playing footsie anymore or under the table. Now it's going to turn into a slap fest, punch fest on top of the table. This new economic order is coming in, come hell or high water. A reset is going to happen on our dollar-based economy. Oil is going to be used as a weapon. And Steve, I mean, again, correct me if any of this is not ringing true with you, but exactly the same thing, for example, that we did to collapse the Soviet Union is going to be turned back on us. There will be a tide of dollars coming back to the United States, and that's going to debase our currency. Look, we got Bernanke talking about this tapering off here in September, October. Really? I mean, this is, again, what we're seeing here is a theft of all of our wealth. And now, of course, it's not going to happen necessarily. I mean, it's a process. Syria is part of this process. It's, again, the flashbang of the Magic Act. But it's a huge flashbang and a huge diversion. As the bombs are flying, the economy will collapse here in this country because of what? Because of oil, the energy, the threat of cutting off oil to this country. Everything is going to grind to a halt, and that's when as you spoke eloquently about this earlier, Steve, about what's going to happen here domestically. And you mentioned something too about the race issue.
That guy's got to be a shill or dumber than dumb, and I'm sorry if that's offensive. Specifically, we're going to have race wars. Specifically, your money's not going to work. You're not going to have access to credit cards. You're not going to have access to funds. You're not going to be able to write a check for anything. You're going to be living in constant fear of your life. You won't have access to gas unless you get on the black market. You are going to be hungry. You're going to be without power. You're not, and even as a prepper, you've got to make sure that the people you've made friends with are really your friends. I can only tell you this. I have never in my life, having experienced betrayal, seen such a weak-willed, skunk-livered group of people that I have associated with in the past. I'm putting that in the past. I have never seen the betrayal, the cowardice, and the arrogance of people saying, well, if it gets bad, I'm just going to come to your house and say, happy to have it. I won't be there. Now, the point that I'm saying, Doug, is what more specifically can I say? The U.S. military is going to experience a staggering defeat. Biological weapons are going to be released. Radiological weapons are already being released. Look, they've killed the Pacific Ocean, and people are still, singing yo-ho-ho and a bottle of rum. To eat seafood, you'd have to be dumb. And I get emails from up and down the West Coast, all the way up in the Gulf of Alaska. People are saying, Steve, we're seeing really gory stuff on these fish. We're seeing gross. We're seeing this, and a third of the life in the sea died. We're going to see the selling of our children into slavery. Like Pastor Langford said, we were in bondage. Now we're going into slavery. We're going into where the very, very essence of everything you thought you owned, including your person. You're being genetically raped. You're being genetically typed. Every phone call, every email, every fax, soon to have every brainwave fed into the computer, but God himself, Almighty God, will intervene. Isn't it interesting that one of the exercises, now I'm torqued, Doug, that has got to be the dumbest asked question that I have ever heard proposed. Specifically, what more can be specific than, and see, now I understand why W and Rosebud and my people, my general friends, just shake their head. I understand, and I apologize to all you guys that are without equal for my stupidity and my naivety for trying to think that the average American even cares. But we're not dealing with the average American. We're dealing with those who are called by the living God, who want to know, who are praying, believing people. And that's why, Doug, you do what you do, and I do what I do. And if that's offensive to that person, I'm happy as a clam now. I'm just joyful. I mean, if I could jump a little higher, I'd be doing backflips, okay? If people can't see in real time what that question indicates, I don't know what can. What is more specific than that? The total end of everything you know as normal. The total end of your life as you've known it. The choices you can make, you will no longer be able to make. The choices are being made for you. And that's as specific as I can get. You know what they want? They want a day and the hour. And God won't give it to them, and I don't have it. So they're going to have to do the same thing we all are going to have to do. And again, I wanted to say one last time, that is the dumbest asked question I've ever had proposed to me on talk radio. Hi, a monumental day, 8/26/13.
Yeah, and I agree, because exactly how much more, the mechanics, we're seeing it play out. And I've got to say this. I had a conversation with somebody the other day that, a close family member who said, after watching the chemical weapons attacks in Syria, the statement was, well, something should be done. Well, hasn't enough been done already? I mean, but I guess I see that because of the mindset of the people. What are we going to do about it? Well, and clearly people aren't understanding the large picture, the bigger picture. And when you understand the bigger picture, then you know what's going on here. Steve, am I wrong here to say that this is the Illuminati Luciferian agenda here, both sides of, or all sides of this upcoming conflict are being funded by the very same people? I mean, isn't that what we're seeing? Just like
we're seeing the global chess masters moving all the pieces around so they can declare game over, checkmate, and take everybody's stuff.
Right.
Doug, one of the questions that escapes the average person: who's going to occupy all the FEMA camps? And those who are fortunate enough to get to live, what happens to all their stuff? You think you go in there for re-education, go back to Grandma Joe's silver-plated tea set, or, that Western piece of art on the wall, or your Colt 45 Peacemaker collection, or your gun safe with 82 guns in it, I mean, see, that's where the disconnect is. It's almost like can I say this? It's almost like we are a cartoon. And as crazy as the Roadrunner and Coyote cartoons are, we are absolutely in a cartoon. And the denial is so great that when the Jews went into captivity, they said we were as people who dreamed a dream. In other words, they couldn't believe it's happening to them. And when you're taking classes, combat classes and counter intel classes and everything, the one thing everybody's got to get over is this initial denial. The first time someone shoots at you, I can't believe they're shooting at me. No, you better know they're shooting at you. You better be able to shoot back and shoot better than they do. Okay? The point that I'm trying to make is this. People want to feel warm and fuzzy, and the people that, are keeping you in that warm and fuzzy dead zone, the land of the walking dead, as I used to call it, before they, incorporated it into, a TV name for a zombie movie, is the fact is that everybody wants to have a group hug and sing Kumbaya. That's why the emerging church movement is so popular, because it is a bloodless belief system. It doesn't give Jesus the honor and the worship he is due as King of Kings and Lord of Lords. And Jesus said there'll come a time when they're going to kill us and believe they're doing God a favor. I can see how that would happen easily. And as I've said before, it'll be in a stadium, and it'll be as they basically are beheading the Christians or shooting them or whatever. It's going to be just like the Roman Colosseum, and everybody's going to basically have out their evangelical charts. They're going to say, well, that's not us because we're going to be raptured, as the people that have warned them are, being slaughtered. By the way, I posted a story on my alert section about the guillotines. I want to go into the guillotines. I asked one of the most famous double agents I ever interviewed in my life why the guillotines, and he said it goes back to Genesis 3:15. And the cutting off the head. It's the devil's rage, and that's why in the book of Revelation you see those martyrs who are beheaded for the testimony of Jesus. Well, look, the guy that sent that to me, Rob, I know him. He's given me great photos. So the first thing I get is a shill saying, well, if everybody would have an iPhone and take pictures of that. If they don't understand how the military works or the axis of military, sometimes you don't get to do that. Let me put this into perspective for everyone. 20 years ago when I started on talk radio, and this isn't an old guy reminiscing, this is telling you where it all evolved from, because you hear the fruit of all these stories and then people take it and run with it, but I'll tell you how it came about. The red list, the blue list, and the green list, it's not yellow, came about by a guy who was one of the head guys for the Environmental Protection Agency over the western United States. He used to listen to me on KHNC, Johnstown, Colorado. That's where I started talk radio. And he gave me the whole plan. In those days, all of the, quote, waste incinerators were nothing more than the allocation of funds to, when this day comes, to get rid of all these bodies, they incinerate them, okay? That was the methodology. The red list were the gun owners at that time, the most outspoken critics of the government, and the people they knew they could not change. So those are the guys that get axed. A good example is Breitbart was red-listed, okay? Hastings was red-listed.
Right.
Then the blue lists are the people that go along with the destruction of their fellow countrymen initially for the first 30 or 60 days. That would be the military and the police forces. Once the police forces have joined in the slaughter of the innocents, then they get off. Now, this man, it cost him his life. So I could give a darn, and I'll make it nice, I could give a darn what you shills and you pathetic cowards think, or you paid professionals try and distort. This is the truth. Then we have the open admission that, boy, there's an enemies list, and that the National Defense Authorization Act, 1867, says people can be killed at the discretion of the president. Remember that, everyone? Not one of those... You got it. And interesting enough, Breitbart was axed, I think, within 5 or 10 minutes after that, going into law on midnight. So now you've got the situation of the blue list. The blue list are the people I appeal to. I'm saying to those of you in the military, to those of you, you all have assassins assigned to you. In those days, Doug, in those days, I was told there were 382,000 foreign troops, NATO preferably, or primarily training in the United States. Who knows how many it is now? The blue list will be allowed to participate in the slaughter, and once they're done, they all get whacked, okay? That would be by the Spetsnaz or the Chinese or whoever's already here. Then you got the green list. The green list are the people that go to camp, and they get re-educated. Now, it gets even more interesting than that. If you've seen the play for euthanasia, the primary health care givers, the doctors, the nurses, the people who provide any type of home care to the elderly or, hospice, etc. The thing the New World hates more than anything is compassion. Do you know, if you read DARPA, Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, half of their press releases are talking about a soulless, they don't usually call it soulless, but something that isn't bound by tradition that can be ordered to kill without emotion. Killing without emotion is their wonderful word. I can remember just getting laughed at, and jokes even, on some big TV programs and talk radio programs be talking about this stuff because that'll never happen. What's that guy smoking? Nothing. I don't smoke. What's he drinking? Quit when I got saved, Well, he's just flat out crazy. No, I've got the mind of Christ. So the point is that this is going on right now, and it's tough to get people to understand that it doesn't matter what their denials. Their denials aren't going to, how do I say this, keep their bacon out of the frying pan. If they're kosher, it's not going to keep their lamb out of off of the rotisserie,
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, you're exactly right. Steve, let me back up here because I think that there's a couple of issues here people are not really understanding about. Well, of course, you covered the list. Now, how soon after things go into motion will this... Now, I understand that a lot of this is in play already, but when does this go into full play? I mean, we're talking, full out, full scale, get rid of everything, let's do it now. The button is pushed, the orders are given, and we're seeing things change forever. At what point in this process are we going to see that?
Well, according to the people that I talked to, and my best guess is probably within 6 to 7 days.
Okay, I'm not talking for a date. I guess the event sequence. The sequence is, okay, maybe we should say it this way. Let's back up, Doug. How will it be when Syria is attacked? How soon will Iran reciprocate? Will Iran's reciprocate be primarily aimed at Israel first, or will they initiate activating their terror cells in the United States? Same thing with Syria. Then, again, now to bring North Koreans, how will the North Koreans be involved in this? Because North Korea has got different agreements with Syria also. Right.
Now, obviously, we know from Isaiah 17, Damascus is toast, okay? But the point is what we don't know is how it plays out after that. What will happen to the gold and silver markets while that's taking place? Well, my guess is that the future markets will declare force majeure, which means they don't have to cover their contracts because there's an act of war. So the people that are speculating, just like that doctor friend, we'll call him Dr. Dumb, who thinks that, exchange-traded funds are the way it's going to be good. I said, so you're going for a promise, an IOU, and a lie against the silver you have in your hands. Then he said, yep, I'm doing it. Yeah, so the
wow.
events that are going to happen, the question is how fast will the economy implode? I would say based on, and you're the investigator, based on ancillary evidence of the last week, with the exchanges shutting down, with eBay being down, with Google being down, all those things, those are preemptive indicators that somebody's getting ready to put the kill switch into effect. Concurrent with the kill switch will be the instantaneous plunder of accounts, okay? I mean, let's just say this. Let's say you're Joe Average or whatever.
Right.
You're planning on retiring on $2,000 a month, Social Security, blah, blah, blah. How will that affect you? The average person in America has less than $500. I think 50% of the Americans now have less than $500 in savings. The average American is only 1 to 2 paychecks away from hitting the streets. I talked to a friend of mine, and the guy makes good money, but he says, Steve, every time I even think I'm getting ahead, something comes up, something breaks down. And I said, brother, Rick, that's what you're dealing with. You're dealing with entropy. Everything is wearing down and wearing out. You and I cannot keep up with it because the banks are not paying interest, because they want you in the speculative accounts. They want you in the speculative accounts so that they can basically pull the switch. Listen, you got Warren Buffett. You've got the biggest guys in the world, the billionaires, dumping their stock right and left. The only people that are in the stock market are suckers. I know people that are sitting on 7 and 8 figures in a bank account and telling me they feel secure. Ladies and gentlemen, if you're in that category, even if you got 5 figures or 6 figures, I want you to go buy an ice cream cone tonight. I'm serious, Doug. This is the ice cream cone test. I want you to just to stare at the ice cream cone and then put it in your forehead, let it melt down into your face, then take it away, put it in your forehead, let it melt down, and always miss your mouth, because everybody knows ice cream cones aren't meant to eat, but they're meant to put in your forehead. No, they're meant to eat. What I'm saying is it's such a stupid exercise in futility to think that you deposit an electron in an electron depository, or you basically deposit a piece of paper with ink. So the molecular structure of ink and paper, I'm not trying to be a smartass, okay? I'm just trying to get people to understand this. Then it's turned into a computer entry, which is a series of electrons, okay, which are stored in a medium of storage. So what you've done now is you've taken something that was real and you've put it in the virtual world. The virtual world is saying, we got all your stuff. We want all your stuff. The average person, I don't know what they're going to do. I can't answer this question. How will America respond instantaneously to the total evaporation of their wealth, their savings, their future, their present ability to eat? How will that? And it's going to be a cataclysm. When you generate a problem of that magnitude, you have the solution. Well, we knew this was going to happen, so we prepared these camps. We can get 3 square meals, have a warm place to stay. Oh, by the way, the price of entry is your soul. Again, that's the only thing I know how to try, and I've got to use the most, how should I say, sometimes even flippant metaphors or illustrations to show it's inane to think that somehow, everything will be back up in 72 hours. Hey, if they shoot you an hour 24, you don't have to worry about the next 48.
And precisely. And you hit that right on the head. Let me ask you a question, because now we didn't talk about this before the show at all, but let me ask you a question, Steve. We've been doing on the larger scale. Now we're going to go. I'd like to go back to our current situation with Syria and how the U.S. is really doing the bidding of the Saudis, and who's behind the Saudis, but the international bankers and this Luciferian agenda. But I'm going to ask you a question and I just want your take on this. Since we're fighting this, or since everything is so asymmetrical, what would happen? And do you think that this is a possibility, that one of the blowbacks, one of the fallouts of what we do in Syria, since we're actually doing the military muscle of the Saudis, what would happen is it possible that maybe the blowback could be against Saudi Arabia, and bam, there goes the oil, there goes Saudis right out the window? Because, as I understand it, the Saudi royal family, I mean, they're not too solid there. You got people defecting, and
absolutely, Doug. And guess what? Guess where the first Iran will hit Saudi before they hit Tel Aviv.
See, okay, and I'm glad you mentioned that, because it just seems like the Saudis, and I had this conversation last night as well with my source. The Saudis here are not necessarily in the clear, and they could be, they could be the target. And if that happens, what about the Suez Canal, Steve? Could that be shut down, or the Strait of Hormuz?
I mean, easily, Doug. I mean, the Suez goes out, and look, here's the thing that really is problematic. Most of the Americans who are traveling now with the price of fuel where it is, the Saudis, listen, you just basically nailed the greatest fear factor in the planet right now. Certainly isn't with the American citizens, because they don't seem to care. They're comatose, okay? But the Saudis, they care, because Iran has made it known. And for the record, Saudi Arabia does have nuclear weapons, okay? I have a friend who's one of my clients that was an Air Force guard on the nuclear weapons that are stationed in Riyadh, okay, and other places throughout Saudi Arabia.
All right.
So they do. Iran knows that. Iran is awful close to Saudi Arabia. It's a whole lot easier to whack the Saudis. That's why the Saudis are really basically trying to make a deal with the Russians to give them control of the global